Welcome to today's webinar, What is Legal and Financial Navigation? My name is Joanna Morales, and I will be speaking today on this topic. If you want to learn more about my background, you can do that on our website at triagecancer.org. But I'm actually a cancer rights attorney by training. And so I've spent the better part of my legal career helping people navigate the legal issues that come up after a cancer diagnosis. But when I say I'm a cancer rights attorney, I usually get a funny look from people. And people always ask me, well, what's legal about cancer? And my answer is just about everything. But they're usually things that we don't think of as legal issues. So whether or not the Food and Drug Administration approves a particular treatment is a legal issue. Whether or not you can get access to health insurance coverage is a legal issue. Whether or not that health insurance policy is going to cover that treatment that was approved by the Food and Drug Administration is a legal issue. Whether or not you can take time off from work to get access to that treatment is a legal issue. So many of those things, like figuring out your health insurance options, people don't think of as legal issues, but they're actually rooted in the law. And it's the law that provides us access to these benefits and protections. And it's incredibly important for us to understand those benefits and protections so that we can navigate these systems effectively, because they're incredibly complicated systems. So to help with that, at Triage Cancer, we offer a legal and financial navigation program, and it is open to anyone who has questions about legal and financial issues that come up as a result of a cancer diagnosis. And people can go to our website and fill out a form, and it will allow you to actually schedule an appointment to speak with one of our staff. This helps to eliminate some of that phone tag that often happens when people call and may leave a message if they can't get a hold of someone right away. And so using our online form is very effective, but if people don't have access to the internet, they can call us as well. So with our navigation services, we help explain how the law applies to someone's situation and help people understand their options and to weigh those options so that they can make educated decisions about taking next steps. Now, over the 20 plus years that I've been doing this work as a lawyer, the types of issues that people have that are cancer-related legal issues haven't changed. So you can see this is some data from our navigation program last year of the types of issues that people call us about. And primarily it's health insurance, employment and disability insurance, and then finances. And really, it hasn't changed in all of that time. Those are the most common issues that most people have to deal with in some way, shape, or form. Now, at Triage Cancer, we often hear many stories of people's experiences in trying to navigate these issues. And this is just one example. So Lori, a clinical trials manager at a small company in Iowa, has been diagnosed with cancer, and her oncologist doesn't think she should return to work. She has a short-term disability policy at work and a health insurance plan, but her employer pays the premiums. She doesn't know how her unemployment, short-term disability, and Social Security disability insurance benefits would all work together, or what her options are to stay at work and how to keep her health insurance. And Lori calls us anxious about her future. This is a very common situation that people have questions about how to manage work and taking time off and keeping access to health insurance coverage. At Triage Cancer, we think that when someone is diagnosed with a serious medical condition like cancer, it's like trying to put together one of those 1,000-piece puzzles without getting a look at what the picture is supposed to be. So it's operating in the dark in terms of how to navigate these systems. So at Triage Cancer, we try to help people understand what their puzzle picture could look like, but we also identify the individual puzzle pieces that could make up their puzzle, because everybody's puzzle is going to be different based on the federal laws that they have access to, the state laws and programs they have access to, what their employer's specific policies and benefits are. Do they have access to insurance coverage? And what's their existing financial situation? All of those things together are going to make someone's puzzle. But the challenge in looking at all of this information is that the details matter, and the law is full of details. And so we often hear where people might be familiar with one law or one option or one program, but they don't understand all the things that might be available to them. And you'll hear a theme throughout this presentation that it's very important to understand all the options so that you can make the best decision for you. Now, financial toxicity is a term that was coined by some researchers in 2013, and it might be a relatively new term, but it is not a new problem. As I mentioned, all of those challenges related to work and insurance and finances have at least been going on over the last few decades. But the reason we haven't been able to solve financial toxicity is because there are so many contributing factors to it. And at Triage Cancer, we think that the primary contributor to financial toxicity is having adequate health insurance coverage. If you don't have adequate coverage, you're likely to have much higher out-of-pocket costs, and that contributes to that financial burden. So a lot of the research around financial toxicity has focused on, does it exist? Do patients have financial burden? Should we ask patients about financial burden? And how do we ask patients about financial burden? But at Triage Cancer, we actually have some solutions to help people avoid or lower the financial burden of a cancer diagnosis. And today I want to give you some examples of those cancer-related legal issues that are often financial issues, and the ways that the law can help people actually avoid or mitigate financial toxicity. So starting with health insurance, because we think it is the primary contributor to financial toxicity, the challenge in talking about health insurance and navigating the healthcare system is that people don't understand the healthcare system because we have a very complicated one in the United States. There is data that shows that only 4% of Americans could actually define the 4 key terms used in health insurance. And only 40% of Americans said that they're very confident that they can choose the right health insurance plan for them. So if you feel like you don't understand your own health insurance coverage, you're absolutely not alone. So I want to start by talking about those key terms because I'm going to use them throughout the presentation. And they are the things that people should understand about their own health insurance coverage. So there are costs that we pay to have health insurance. Generally, we pay a premium each month to have an insurance plan. But then there are costs that we pay when we actually use our health insurance coverage. And the first is our deductible. It's a fixed dollar amount that we pay each year before our health insurance coverage starts paying for our medical expenses. So you might have a $250 deductible, or you could have a $6,000 deductible, depending on your plan. And then there's something called a copayment, which is a fixed dollar amount that you pay when you get certain types of care. So your plan might have a $20 copayment to visit the doctor's office, or you might have a $50 copayment to see a specialist. And that's different from coinsurance or cost share. And those are 2 terms that mean the same thing. It's a percentage, and it's the difference between what insurance companies pay for our medical expenses and what we pay for our medical expenses. So if you have a plan that's an 80-20 cost share, then your plan pays for 80% of your expenses and you're responsible for 20%. And then there's something called an out-of-pocket maximum. And this is probably the most important thing for people to understand about their policy, because in a worst case scenario, it's the most that you're going to pay out of pocket for your medical expenses during the year. And it's a fixed dollar amount. So you might have a $2,000 out-of-pocket maximum, or you could have a $10,000 out-of-pocket maximum, depending on your plan. And the way that you reach your out-of-pocket maximum is actually a math problem. So you get to add up what you pay for your deductible, plus what you pay for your co-payments, plus your co-insurance amounts. And then when you reach that out-of-pocket maximum, then your insurance kicks in at 100% for the rest of the year, and you don't pay anything more out of pocket. To give you an example of how this actually works, Dan has a plan that has a $2,000 deductible. It's an 80-20 plan, and he has an $8,000 out-of-pocket maximum. So he spends a week in the hospital and he walks out with a $102,000 hospital bill. But what does he actually have to pay, assuming he's had no other medical expenses during the year? So first he pays his $2,000 deductible, which leaves $100,000 left of that bill. Then his insurance will pay 80%, which means he's responsible for 20% or $20,000 of that bill. But how much does he actually have to pay of that $20,000 bill? Well, he has an $8,000 out-of-pocket maximum, and he's already paid his $2,000 deductible. So he only has to spend another $6,000 of that $20,000 bill to reach his out-of-pocket maximum. So then his insurance will kick in and pick up the rest of that bill. Now, we're not suggesting that $8,000 isn't a lot of money, but it does allow you to plan around a worst case scenario of the most that you would have to pay out of pocket during the year. Now, as I mentioned, the details matter. So we do have a video on this content called Health Insurance Basics if you want to see this information again. But what it doesn't cover are those details. When we're talking about out-of-pocket maximums, you might have a plan, if it covers your family members, that has an individual out-of-pocket maximum and a family out-of-pocket maximum. And when we're talking about marketplace plans, their out-of-pocket maximums on those plans are required to include deductible, co-payments, and co-insurance amounts, both for medical care that you receive and prescription drugs. So it's the most protective for consumers. Some employer plans, however, carve things out of that out-of-pocket maximum. So some plans don't include deductibles, so it's just going to be the co-payments and co-insurance that go towards the out-of-pocket maximum. Some don't include deductibles or co-payments, and some have a separate out-of-pocket maximum for prescription drugs. So it's very important for you to know how your specific plan works with respect to an out-of-pocket maximum. So that's why we can't just talk globally about out-of-pocket maximums. We need to actually look at the plans that we have to understand how our plans work. Now, in the United States, there's only 3 places where we get our health insurance coverage. We're either getting it directly from an insurance company, we're getting it through the government, like through Medicare or Medicaid or military or veterans plans, or we're getting it through an employer. About 50% of people in the United States still get their health insurance coverage through an employer. It is incredibly important for people to understand all of their health insurance options, not just the option that they've maybe had for a while or that was presented to them by an employer, or maybe even just suggested by a neighbor. So it's incredibly important for people to understand all of their health insurance options. And to give you an example, meet the Gellers. Ross is 27 and Rachel is 25, and they're married. On July 20th, Rachel decided to take time off from work to deal with her cancer treatment and recovery. She used to have health insurance through her employer, but when her employer told her, when she told her employer that she was leaving, her employer gave her paperwork to elect COBRA coverage. COBRA would cost Rachel $800 a month. Ross has insurance through his employer that costs him $300 a month. He makes $40,000 a year, which is about 8% of his income. Adding spousal coverage to Ross's policy would make the monthly premium go up to $500 a month. which would equal about 15% of their household income. Rachel is very worried because she has a surgery scheduled in August. Now, many people would look at this situation and they would immediately think about COBRA, and maybe they would think about a marketplace plan. But Rachel actually has 4 different options for comprehensive health insurance coverage. And she actually needs to do some math to figure out which option would be best for her and would be the least expensive. So for those of you wondering, she would have access to COBRA coverage. She'd have access to a marketplace plan. She could go to Ross's plan through his employer. But because of her age, she may also have access to her parents' health insurance plan. So again, this is an example of why it's important to understand all of your options. And at Triage Cancer, we have a plethora of resources to help people understand their health insurance options. But once you know all of your options, how do you actually choose? And so I want to walk you through an exercise that is relevant if you're trying to compare marketplace plans. If you are offered more than one choice through your employer, you can actually use this exercise. You can compare what your employer offers you to the marketplace, and you can also compare Medicare Advantage plans using the same exercise. So here we have 3 plans. The first is a bronze plan. It has a $200 monthly premium and an $8,000 out-of-pocket maximum. There's a silver plan at $275 a month with a $6,000 out-of-pocket maximum, and a platinum level plan at $400 a month with a $2,000 out-of-pocket maximum. So the question is, can you tell just by looking at these plans, which is actually going to cost you the least by the end of the year? And the answer is no, you can't tell which of these plans is going to cost you the least by the end of the year, assuming that you're going to hit your out-of-pocket maximum. So you actually have to do the math. And the way that you do the math is that you take the monthly premium and you multiply it by 12, because that's how much it's going to cost you to have the plan for the year. And then you add that to the out-of-pocket maximum. So then which of these plans actually ends up costing you the least by the end of the year? Despite that high monthly premium that we might get sticker shock when looking at, it turns out that the platinum level plan actually ends up saving you a couple $1,000s by the end of the year, assuming that you're going to hit your out-of-pocket maximum. And when we're talking about the cost of cancer care, the likelihood of you hitting your out-of-pocket maximum is pretty high. So when we talk about having adequate health insurance coverage being the #1 way to lower the financial burden of a cancer diagnosis, this is the #1 way that we mean. You actually have to do the math to see which plan is actually going to cost you the least. You can't just look at the cost of the monthly premium to find out what the plan is actually going to cost you for the year. But you can't just be looking at cost. It's a factor, but you have to make sure that any plans that you're looking at actually cover the providers and the hospitals and the facilities that you go to. Because if they don't cover those providers and facilities, then the plan is going to be pretty useless to you. And if you want to go to those providers, you're going to have to pay out-of-network rates to see those providers. And that's going to increase your costs. You also want to make sure that any plan that you're looking at actually covers your prescription drugs. So Triage Cancer does actually have some tools to help people pick health insurance plans. So we do have an animated video that covers the highlights of how to do it. And then we have a worksheet that can help you compare the plans and actually do the math. And it walks you step by step on pulling out that information from the plan and plugging it into the formularies to help you actually do the math. So this is a resource that we have available on our website that you can print out. Now, turning to medical bills, this is another place where the law can be helpful, but people face challenges in getting through the system. And part of the reason why is because there's a lot of paper. Even if it's being delivered to you electronically, it's still a lot of paper and information that you actually have to take a look at. because just from your insurance company, you might get a letter that says, we've received your claim. You don't have to do anything. It just says we've received your claim. Then you might get a letter that says we're processing that claim. Still don't have to do anything, just processing. Then the last piece of information is the most important. It's called the explanation of benefits, or EOB. And it looks something like this. So it's got kind of a chart on it. It's got your information, a summary of that particular bill. And then it shows you things like the services that you received, how much your insurance plan paid, and then how much you're responsible for paying. The most important part of this EOB is that it says somewhere on it, this is not a bill. You do not have to pay your explanation of benefits. This is just a notice to let you know how the insurance company handled the claim that was sent from your provider to the insurance company. The final piece of paper that you're going to get is the bill from your provider. The problem is that these pieces of paper don't always arrive in order, especially when it's being mailed. So you might get the bill before you get the EOB, or even the piece of paper from the insurance company that says we're processing your claim. It's very important to wait for the EOB and then compare that to the bill before you actually pay the bill, because things might change. So your provider might be super quick and send you the bill before they've received any paperwork from the insurance company, and they might end up charging you more than you actually need to pay because your insurance company is going to pay for some of that bill. So keeping track of that paperwork and comparing them and making sure they're accurate, because it's a human process to type things into a computer, and making sure that the information that's on the bill is correct and that the insurance company has paid the correct amount of money that they're supposed to pay. And never be afraid to ask questions about this process, either from the insurance company or from the provider. But if your insurance company comes back and says, we're not going to pay anything and we're denying your claim, that's a legal issue, and you have the right to appeal that denial. Now, if you have a private health insurance plan, like through an employer or an individual plan, there are two levels of appeal. There's an internal appeal where you can go back to the insurance company and ask them to look at it again. And there's an external appeal where if the insurance company still says no, you get to go outside the insurance company to an independent entity and ask them to look if your care is medically necessary. And if they decide that it is, that decision is binding on the insurance company. Now, I often call this external appeals process the best kept secret of our healthcare system because no one uses it. Unfortunately, the people that do use it are very successful. So the unfortunate thing is that it's a successful process for patients because about 50% of the time on average, they're actually getting their claims approved, but no one's actually utilizing the system. And when I say no one, I'm really not exaggerating. So this is data from 2021, specifically for marketplace plans, where 48 million claims were denied in 2021. And only 0.1% of those claims were appealed. And that's just the first level of appeal, not even to external appeal. So 99.9% of people did not appeal those denials. And basically what that means is that people are either paying for that care out of pocket, or they're not getting the care that was prescribed by their healthcare team. And if they're paying for it out of pocket when their insurance company should have paid for it, that's only contributing to the financial burden. So here we have a law that provides protections for consumers, but consumers aren't tapping into that benefit and protection, and it's contributing to the financial burden of serious medical conditions. So at Triage Cancer, because this is a bit of a soapbox issue for us, we want people to use the appeals process. We have a lot of resources to help, including a module on cancer finances that helps people understand the process for appeals based on the different types of insurance that someone might have. And so you can find that information there. Now, another example of a new law that is helpful related to medical bills is the No Surprises Act, which went into effect January 1st of last year in 2022. And if someone gets a surprise bill from a provider they thought was going to be in network, but turns out to be out of network, they can actually get help navigating that bill. At the federal level, through the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, because of this new law, there is now a No Surprises help desk, which you can call for assistance in getting your bill handled, or you can actually file a claim online, and you can actually get help getting the health insurance company to pay the provider as if they were an in-network provider. So again, this is a very useful law, but many consumers are not aware of the ability to get help with these surprise bills. One other thing related to medical bills that is very important, that is also related to the law, is keeping track of all that paper and keeping those records, because you might actually be able to claim some of those expenses on your taxes. And the IRS rules designate what can be included in your taxes or not, so that you can actually pay less on your taxes or get a higher refund, again, directly contributing to your finances. So at Triage Cancer, we created a resource to help you keep track of all of those medical bills. And this is called our medical bill tracker. This is just a screenshot of what it looks like. It is an Excel worksheet that you can download from our website. And here is just a blown up screenshot where you can put in your health insurance plan information and your deductible amount and your co-insurance amount and your out-of-pocket maximum. And as you plug in your bills at the bottom, it helps you keep track of whether or not you've already reached your out-of-pocket maximum. It's also useful to have all of that bill information and what you've paid in one place, so that when you go to do your taxes, it's very easy to have that information already gathered. Yet another law related to medical bills is about how medical debt is going to be handled moving forward. So the 3 credit agencies have actually agreed that as of July 1st of last year, if someone has actually paid a medical collection debt, it won't show up on your credit report anymore, as opposed to it staying on your credit report for 7 years as something negative. And then they won't actually report the medical debts on your credit report for up to a year. So they give you extra time to actually pay that medical bill before it shows up negatively on your credit report. And then the final thing that actually will go into effect this year is that if you have medical debts that are under $500, they're not going to report it on your credit report at all. And so that's actually the greatest number of people with medical debt in the United States actually do have bills under $500 that are damaging their credit report and making it harder for someone to rent an apartment or get a loan or a mortgage or even a cell phone in terms of being able to provide your credit score. So this is actually very helpful for people in managing their medical bills. So turning to employment for a minute, there are lots of places to go for information about your employment rights. There are laws that we refer to as fair employment laws that protect people against discrimination in the workplace based on their medical condition and give them access to reasonable accommodations. And those exist at the federal level, like the Americans with Disabilities Act or ADA, but they also exist at the state level. And then there are laws that we call leave laws, which are about taking time off of work. And again, those exist at the federal level, like the Family and Medical Leave Act or FMLA. But they might also exist at the state, county, or even city level that provide you with the ability to take time off work. And then if you work under an employment contract or you're a member of a union, that union bargaining agreement is going to provide more information about what your rights are in the workplace. And then we forget that the law just provides a bare minimum of what employers have to do. Many employers provide benefits above and beyond the law and those minimum requirements. And so understanding your employer's specific policies is key to being able to navigate work and cancer. So that might include things like what types of insurance you have access to. So not just health insurance, but maybe disability insurance or even life insurance. How can you take time off work? Do you have access to sick time or vacation time or just general paid time off or PTO? Are there specific policies like your coworkers can donate their time off to you? Those are all things that are going to be specific to your employer, and they're usually contained in some version of an employee handbook or manual. And so it's a good idea to track down that information. And if it isn't written, to ask some questions of your employer to find out what the rules are. Now, the Family and Medical Leave Act, or the FMLA, is the federal law that allows employees to take time off for their own serious medical condition or as a caregiver of a spouse, a parent, or a child. And in order to use the FMLA, you actually have to work for a large enough employer, meaning that you work for a private employer with at least 50 or more employees, or you work for a local, state, or federal government. And you have to have worked there at least 12 months, and you have to have worked there at least 1,250 hours in the last 12 months that you worked for the employer. So those are a lot of hurdles that you have to jump in order to use the FMLA's protections. The Americans with Disabilities Act, or the ADA, has a section of the ADA called Title I that specifically focuses on how employees with disabilities are treated in the workplace. And it provides protection against discrimination and gives people access to reasonable accommodations. But it only applies to private employers with 15 or more employees or to state or local governments. Federal employees are actually eligible for the same protections, but under a different law called the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. So I mentioned that the ADA provides reasonable accommodations or access to them. And a reasonable accommodation, the legal definition, is any change in the work environment or in the way things are customarily done that enables an individual with a disability to enjoy equal employment opportunities. So these are just some examples of accommodations that come up most often in the context of a cancer diagnosis. So it could be telecommuting or using technology to be able to do your job. But really one of the most common is adjustable schedules. So that might mean you have a change in your schedule or more breaks during the day or just a flexible schedule each day. But it might also be taking time off work. So extended leave is a potential reasonable accommodation. Now we have a lot of information about the FMLA and the ADA and accommodations on our website on our employment topics page. I want to provide you this overview to show you how all of these laws work together and that it's important for you not just to know what's available at the federal level, but also to know what's available to you at the state level, because sometimes the state laws are better than the federal laws and provide more protection. And state fair employment laws are a good example of that. State fair employment laws are available in almost every state, and they can be more protective than the ADA. And one of the ways that they are more protective is that they cover smaller employers. So this is a chart that shows you all of the states that have a state fair employment law that cover smaller employers. So for example, if you are in Kansas, the Kansas State Fair Employment Law applies to private employers with 4 or more employees. So if you work for an employer between 4 and 15 employees, you actually aren't looking at the ADA for protection. You're looking at the state fair employment law for protection. So that's why you need to know not just what's available to you at the federal level, but also at the state level. Now, if someone does need to take time off work and they're wondering, how do you replace those lost wages if you're taking unpaid leave under the FMLA, for example? Disability insurance is a way to replace those lost wages. And there are different types of disability insurance. So there are private disability insurance options that you can buy directly from an insurance company, but most people don't do that. In the United States, most people don't proactively buy private disability insurance from an insurance company. Most people get access to disability insurance through their employer, where their employer offers a plan as an employee benefit. And I can't tell you the number of people over the years who said, oh, I don't have that. And I sent them back to their employee manual, and it turns out they do, because it was just something they signed on their first day of work and they forgot all about it because the employer pays all the premiums. So they just didn't think about it. So those private disability insurance plans could be short-term plans or long-term plans. Short-term plans typically last 6 to 12 months, whereas long-term plans are typically for medical conditions expected to last longer than 12 months. There are also a handful of states, and by a handful, I just mean 5 and Puerto Rico, that actually provide state disability insurance, and people pay into the system through their payroll taxes and can get access to a state's disability program. The programs are all very different by state. We have information on our quick guide to state disability insurance and the contact information on our state resources page. These plans, depending on the state, can last up to 6 months or maybe even 12 months, like in California, for example. And then that brings us to the 2 federal long-term disability insurance programs that are run through the Social Security Administration. There is the Social Security Disability Insurance Program called SSDI, and there is Supplemental Security Income, which is SSI. And these are both long-term disability insurance programs for individuals who have medical conditions that are expected to last at least a year or longer, and that medical condition is keeping them from being able to work. So we do have a lot of resources on disability insurance to help people understand their options for disability insurance, but also how to actually use it once you have it and to apply for it. So these resources you can find on our disability insurance topics page. Now, we often forget that caregivers also might find themselves in a position where they need to take time off work so that they can be a caregiver. And we do have resources for caregivers on our caregiving topics page. But there are some specific programs for caregivers that could help alleviate some of that financial burden of having to take time off work. And there are more and more states passing laws that actually provide paid leave for caregivers. So they pay into the system through their payroll taxes and can actually take time off work, sometimes even up to 12 weeks, to be able to get paid while taking time off as a caregiver. So we have this information on our quick guide to paid leave. We also have it on our chart of state laws and our state resources pages. So you can find more details about these programs there. There is also a state Medicaid program that is generally called in-home support services, but each state's program might be called something different. It's an optional Medicaid benefit where if someone has Medicaid and is eligible for home health services, they might be able to have a paid caregiver, and that caregiver might be able to be a family member, so that the family member can get paid through this program for providing caregivers services that they were going to do anyways. And so it's not a huge amount of money, but it can help offset some of that cost if someone needs to take time off work. There's also programs specifically for veterans. So again, this information is on our chart of state laws, and it will tell you whether or not family members can get paid as caregivers. So I mentioned the puzzle earlier and the importance of understanding the puzzle pieces and how they all fit together. So to give you an example, Mark has 3 weeks of vacation, 3 weeks of sick time. His employer is covered by the FMLA, and his employer offers a short-term disability policy that lasts up to 12 months. Mark thinks he'll need to be out of work for 15 weeks. So he's going to take the first 3 weeks off as sick time and get paid by his sick time. He'll take the second 3 weeks off as vacation time. And then the remaining 9 weeks, he can tap into his short-term disability policy. And that's how he's going to get paid. For the job and the health insurance protection, the first 12 weeks he's off work, he can tap into the FMLA's protections for his job and health insurance coverage. And then for the remaining 3 weeks, what does Mark do since the FMLA only lasts a total of 12 weeks? He can actually take time off as a reasonable accommodation under the ADA, as long as it's reasonable based on his job responsibilities. So this is an example of where all of these laws and benefits exist separately, and people can use them separately. But this is what it looks like if you put them all together, and that people can tap into the greatest amount of protection and wage replacement options. So everybody is going to put together their puzzle differently, but it's crucial that people understand those individual puzzle pieces so that they can do that in a way that works best for them. But I often say, if all you needed was a law to solve a problem, you wouldn't need lawyers and you wouldn't need law enforcement. Unfortunately, just creating these laws that provide protections isn't enough if people don't know about them and know how to tap into them. So you need education too. And that's really what we focus on at Triage Cancer, and helping people navigate legal and financial issues related to a cancer diagnosis. On cancerfinances.org, we have modules on a whole variety of topics that can have an impact on someone's financial situation. And what is unique about this site is that you can pick a topic and start to identify the information that you're looking for by answering questions, and it will guide you to the information that is relevant to you. We also offer those educational events, and our Triage Cancer conferences are open to everyone. Our next one is coming up on May 20th. It will be offered online on May 20th, and you can register for free. For healthcare professionals, we also offer a full day training through our insurance and finance intensive on many of the topics that we've talked about today, but doing a much deeper dive. And the next one that's available is on March 21st, and you can register for free online for that program. And then, as a reminder, we have our legal and financial navigation program, where if you have individual questions about your situation or a patient's situation, you can contact the navigation program to walk through the options that are available to you. So at this point, I'm going to stop for questions and quickly check the Q&A box because I know that we've had some questions come up, but our team has been answering some of them. So there's a question about whether or not Texas is an employment at will state, and what does that mean? Most states are actually at will states, meaning that an employer can let you go at any time for any reason, at their will. So that's what that means. But someone is not allowed to let you go for a discriminatory reason. So if an employer is letting you go based on your medical condition, that's where those fair employment laws come in to protect you against discrimination based on your medical condition. So being an at-will state doesn't absolve employers from complying with other federal laws that might protect you in the employment setting. So there's a question about, do we have any comments on the impact of additional insurance products such as critical illness coverage? There are lots of different types of supplemental insurance plans that you can buy. You can even buy a cancer-specific policy. Most of those policies are allowed to take into consideration your pre-existing medical conditions. So if you've already been diagnosed with cancer, it's very difficult to get a cancer supplemental insurance plan. But if you had one before you were diagnosed with cancer, it can be incredibly helpful because it pays for things that your health insurance doesn't pay for. So it might pay you a $10,000 cash benefit if you have surgery related to a cancer diagnosis. It might pay for your transportation and lodging if you have to travel to go to treatment. So it might even pay for screenings, cancer screenings throughout the time that you have the policy, because it wants to encourage people to stay on top of cancer screenings. So those additional insurance products can be very useful, but it has to make sense for you. And you want to make sure that you're picking a plan that will cover things that you anticipate you might need. So there's a question about, can someone tap into their short-term disability insurance plan and then use their sick time and their vacation time? Or do you have to use sick and vacation time first and then state disability insurance? And the answer is a little bit it depends, because generally speaking, you can do either and make that choice. The reason why someone might want to use their sick time and vacation time rather than going straight to state disability insurance is that sick time and vacation time pays you at your full salary rate, whereas a short-term disability policy could pay you anywhere from 45 to 90% and rarely up to 100% of your salary rate. So using your sick time and vacation time first, you're actually getting paid as if you were working versus, taking a cut and using your short-term disability policy. But that's again why it's important to understand those benefits and how they kind of work with your specific situation, because there might be a reason you want to hang on to that vacation time for something later, or not use your sick time and vacation time before using the short-term disability plan. So generally speaking, you could do either, but it might depend on your situation and being strategic about what would work best for you. So it looks like those are all of our questions for now. Oh, there's one more. So there's a question in the Q&A box about disability and returning to work. And I'm actually going to suggest that you contact our navigation program so we can get a little more information and be able to fully answer your question based on your situation. So we hope that you've found this presentation useful and will continue to stay connected with Triage Cancer. It was really an introduction to cancer-related legal issues and the importance of navigating these legal and financial issues effectively. We hope that you'll attend more of our monthly webinars and sign up to receive our blog, which covers a lot of substantive topics. You can actually sign up to receive it in your inbox. We hope that you'll also connect with us on social media. And for the healthcare professionals on today, you can actually order our educational materials and we will ship them to you for free. So as a reminder, to receive continuing education credit for today's webinar, you must have stayed to the end. You'll receive an email after the webinar, which will send you a link to the evaluation and post-test, and you need to complete those. It does require your name and email, and that's to certify that you actually completed the evaluation. And it's also the email address where we send you your certificates within 4 weeks. And we really hope that you will actually complete the evaluation for us. We appreciate your feedback. And you do have to receive a passing grade on the post-test if you want continuing education. So if you see this message, once you complete the evaluation and post-test, your submission has been logged and you passed, you don't need to do anything else. If you receive this message and that your score was less than 80%, you actually will see the link to retake the post-test, and you can copy that link into your browser and retake the post-test. You don't need to resubmit the evaluation. So we hope that you all found the information useful, and we appreciate you attending today, and we hope you have a great rest of the day.